I think we're all good, aren't we?
Okay, that's it.
Perfect, thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome everybody to this meeting of the Planning Committee, which is being held remotely. We are recording the meeting, and the recording will be available on the Council's website following the meeting. The meeting is being streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel. The link is provided on the Council's website. Please note that any comments posted on the chat feed of the Council's YouTube channel during the recording of this meeting will not be monitored by the Council. All mobile devices should be switched off or set to silent so that the meeting is not interrupted by ringtones. Please switch your profile to mute unless you are speaking. Procedure for each item is the Planning Officer will present their report. The Planning Officer will then read out any written Not sure what happened there. How far did I get before I'm muted? Procedure for each item. Not sure what happened there. So the procedure for each item is the Planning Officer will present their report. The Planning Officer will then read out any written statements received from members of the public on a particular item. The Chair will invite those who have given notice that they wish to address the committee on a particular application to do so. Each person will be invited to join the meeting via Zoom and will have 3 minutes to give their views. Once all comments have been given to the meeting, the Chair will invite members of the committee to discuss the application and reach a decision. So with that out of the way, good evening, everybody. Unfortunately, Councillor Brown is not well, so she'll be unable to join us. So I'll be chairing the meeting tonight. We'll start from the beginning. Apologies for absence.
We have Councillor McGurran substituting for Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest? No, I can't see anybody raising their hand. So we'll move straight into item number 3, which is planning application number 20/00549/outline application for the erection of 6-storey blocks to provide 96 residential units. You can all read the rest on the agenda. Thank you.
Right. Hello. I hope everyone can hear me now. Sorry, I tried to unmute and it wouldn't let me there for a second. Technology, eh? Right. If you could move on to the next slide immediately, Ellie. Thank you. The application is in respect to the redevelopment of this currently vacant site to the north side of Romwell Road, with a 6-storey building comprising 96 residential flats with 14 commercial units at ground and mezzanine levels. With 121 car parking spaces, together with secure cycle storage in a decked car park to the rear of the building. Obviously, there to the left, you've got the location plan, and then to the right, the site plan or block plan almost there, really just showing the building within its curtilage. If I could have the next slide, please, Ellie. Thank you. Okay, well, the site is located within the town centre of Wickford and abutted by an existing sports ground to the north, comprising tennis courts and cricket ground, together with an electricity substation. To the west, it's a little white building there, is a car repair and tyre centre, whilst to the east is a secondary access to the sports ground. To the south side of Romwell Road, opposite the proposed site, there are a range of established commercial premises with residential accommodation above and a petrol filling station. If I go to the next slide, please, Ellie. Thank you. These street view photographs are taken from the east and west, show the application site in the context of Romwell Road. And obviously, you can clearly see the current vacant site, which is bounded by the white hoardings there, just to give you an idea of it in context. If I could have the next slide, please, Ellie. Thank you. Okay, in terms of the history of the redevelopment of the site, this goes back to 2006, when an application for a building of the same height, massing and general design as the current application was refused planning permission by the council, but allowed on appeal to the Secretary of State the following year. This scheme was for 84 apartments with 3 larger commercial units at ground floor level and no mezzanine level. So although the building was effectively 5-storey, it was a similar height because it hadn't got that mezzanine within the commercial element. Following the grant of planning permission, some works were undertaken at the site. However, it's currently unclear whether development has lawfully commenced or remains extant. In any event, the application and appeal predate current national planning policy framework, which puts significant weight on the importance of high quality design. If I could have the next slide, please, Ellie. Thank you. Excuse me. There have been 2 subsequent planning applications in 2017 and 2019 for the redevelopment of the site. The first with 2 buildings of 6 and 7 stories, that's the upper picture, and the second for 2 6-storey buildings. As you can see from these front elevation plans, these buildings were of similar height to the 2007 scheme. The dotted line there on both indicates the rough outline of that building. The first application was refused planning permission by the council on the grounds of the height, scale and massing and general design, resulting in an intrusive addition harmful to the character and appearance of the area, and failure to create a high quality, well-designed
Sorry,
development.
can I just stop you there? Sorry, I've got a point of order raised by Councillor Rimmer. Councillor Rimmer?
Sorry, the representative from the parish councils, Councillor Foster, has been trying to get in for 10 minutes. He's in the lobby and nobody's letting him in.
Councillor, I think he's in now. Is he? The problem was that he was called Toba, so we didn't recognise the name, but he's been let in now.
Okay, can we confirm it is him?
If he
Yes, thank you. I finally have. Yeah, I'm not quite sure why it's come up with that instead of the normal one, but probably for my other one, which is Tuba Nesto, I assume.
At least you're in now.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Perfect.
Shall I start from where I am, or do you want me to go back?
Just carry on from where you are.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Not miss that much.
Okie dokie. I think I just described the first application and the reasons for that being refused. That's the 2017 proposal. In respect of the second application, an appeal against non-determination was made before a decision was taken, and the appeal is still pending, but members confirm that they would have been minded to refuse planning permission on the same grounds as the earlier scheme. If I could have the next slide, please, Ellie. Thank you very much. Moving on to the application itself, you can clearly see, obviously, from the elevations here, that the design is very similar to the 2006 planning application, comprising a single block of 19.5 metres in height, running the full length of the site frontage, punctuated by 4 gable features, with a ridged roof and with a central access under the building to the car park at the rear for residents. It's indicated the building would be finished in brick with a tiled roof. In height, scale and massing, the building is very similar to all 3 of the development proposals that have been previously submitted for the site. If you could move on to the next slide, please, Ellie. Thank you. Okay, right, now just to move on to the relevant planning considerations and planning balance. The application is within an urban area where paragraph 11 of the NPPF indicates that a presumption in favour of sustainable development would apply unless other material considerations indicate otherwise. Additionally, as members be aware, the council is currently unable to demonstrate a supply of deliverable sites sufficient to provide 5-year worth of housing land supply. As such, the so-called tilted balance is triggered in considering the application. Any permission should be granted unless the adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies of the NPPF as a whole. In terms of the principle, the application site is vacant, previously developed land within the urban area. Wickford Town Centre is an accessible and sustainable location, and the application site is the type of site which should be developed first, ahead of other alternative greenbelt sites. Therefore, in principle, its redevelopment is acceptable. The proposed development would create 96 new residential units, which would help towards meeting the council's 5-year housing land supply, which cannot currently be demonstrated. Now, in terms of affordable housing, the application has been accompanied by a financial viability appraisal, which has concluded that the development cannot afford to make a contribution toward affordable housing. Financial viability is a material planning consideration. Now, previous appraisals have been subject to independent review, and it has been concluded that the scheme could not support affordable housing. Whilst the applicant maintains that no affordable housing can be supported by the development, they have made an offer of £397,000 towards off-site provision of affordable housing on a commercial basis. Affordable housing should normally be provided on site. However, the emerging local plan advises that there may be instances where off-site provision is acceptable. This position would give the council greater flexibility in terms of where and what type of affordable housing could be provided. Given the findings of the viability work and the independent review undertaken on behalf of the council, the offer is considered reasonable in this instance. The proposed development would provide acceptable living accommodation for future residents, with all but 4 of the apartments meeting nationally described space standards and 68% of the apartments having external balconies. Separation distances to existing residential properties in the vicinity would avoid potential for harmful overlooking that might impact upon their living conditions. The impact of the proposed development has also been assessed in relation to the adjacent sports ground. The applicant has offered to make a financial contribution of £90,000 to the sports grounds to mitigate the impact of any overshadowing arising from the proposed development, which is considered to be satisfactory. It's considered the proposed development is acceptable in terms of parking provision, having regard to its sustainable town centre location. As I said earlier, they're providing 121 car parking spaces, so there's at least 1 space per resident plus space for visitors as well. A financial contribution has been offered in respect of public transport improvements as well. No objections are raised in respect of flooding, subject to appropriate planning conditions. And in respect to social infrastructure, financial contributions have also been offered in respect of schools and education. However, the NPPF requires that planning decisions should achieve a high standard of amenity for existing and future occupiers, and that permission should be refused for development of poor design that fails to take the opportunity available for improving the character and quality of an area and the way it functions. Whilst the proposed development is generally similar to that granted permission on appeal in 2007, this predates current planning policy advice set out in the NPPF, which emphasises good design and is supported by planning policy guidance and national design guide. Paragraph 127 of the NPPF in full highlights the importance of design in the built environment, and as I said before, requires high quality design, stating that planning decisions should achieve high standard of amenity for existing and future occupiers. Permission should be refused development of poor design that fails to take the opportunity available for improving the character and the quality of an area and the way it functions, taking into account any local design standards or style guides in terms of supplementary planning documents. In determining applications, great weight should be given to outstanding or innovative design, which promotes high levels of sustainability or help raise the standard design more generally in an area. The proposal would comprise a 6-storey building, as I say, of 19.5 metres in ridge height, running virtually the full length of the site, so not even with the sort of the breaks that the 2 buildings provided that were previously applied for at the site. It's significant height and scale, massing, would represent an intrusive addition and be harmful to the character and appearance of the local area. And we feel would fail to create a high quality, well-designed place. So, due to the lack of a 5-year housing land supply, the relevant development plan policies for supply of housing are considered to be out of date. And we do have to look at this in terms of the balance, the tilted balance. This requires that permission should be granted unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. However, in this instance, it is concluded that the adverse impacts of granting planning permission in terms of poor design would significantly outweigh the benefits outlined when considered against national planning policy guidance. As such, we are recommending that the committee resolves to refuse planning permission for the following reason. The proposed development would, by reason of its height, scale and massing, result in an intrusive addition harmful to the character and appearance of the area and fails to create a high quality, well-designed development, contrary to the requirements of the NPPF, Policy B12 of the Basildon District Local Plan Safe Policies document, and Policy DES1 of the Basildon Borough Revised Publication Local Plan. That's the end of my report, but I have actually got three letters where I have a request for those to be read out to you. So if I go straight into those. The first is from Councillor Malcolm Buckley, who unfortunately is unable to attend the meeting. What he says is, residents are keen to see this site developed in a sympathetic way, which, unfortunately, previous applications failed to deliver. Whilst consent was originally granted on this site for 84 flats, subject to various Section 106 commitments, it has in fact been refused by this planning committee, that decision being overturned by a planning inspector. Whilst recognising that it is unlikely the committee could stop a development similar to that appeal decision, I think it is now incumbent upon developers to reflect on the planning history of the site, having had a clear message from the committee on each of the previous applications that a large carbuncle type development on a principal entry into the town centre is totally unacceptable. If a developer is to go ahead and develop the site, those concerns need to be taken into account, the views and aspirations of Wickford residents, of which I'm one. And I would urge the landowners to have a full and frank, open consultation with the public, not just limited to an online survey, in order that a sympathetic development can be brought forward, which will gain some local support. None of us wish to see a high-level flatted development, but recognise that a well-designed lower level will minimise the impact on the town. It should also be important that appropriate materials and finishes are used to help regenerate the Romwell Road and Broadway end of the town centre. The original Section 106 commitments to the sports clubs and scout groups should also be recognised as part of the package. For the first time on this site, I'm glad to endorse the officer recommendation and trust that the committee will do so likewise. If you don't mind, I'm just going to take a very quick sip of water because it's quite a lot of reading. Excuse me. Okay, well, the second letter is from Alan Ball of Cedar Avenue. He states that the original application was for 84 dwellings with commercial on ground floor. So far, this is the only agreed application and was on appeal. The mass of the building has been agreed in principle. With this past application, the issue is with the detail. Now considering the council now considers this application as expired, as stated in the report, this has very little weight in the new application. This new application is of higher density than the original, 320 dwellings per hectare as opposed to 280. The 14 commercial units will eventually be converted to residential, as with other developments in the town, which would make the development 110 residential properties, which would be in excess of 20% increase over the original application. As the report now states, the original has probably not started, which I have been saying since on the council. Perhaps now is the time to state this land should be in line with the street scene opposite and be no more than 3 stories high, in line with older development opposite. Some significant points to consider. Traffic has increased significantly since 2007 along that stretch of road, and we are adding in the region of another 40 dwellings. We need the junction with Swan Lane, the Broadway and Romwell Road significantly enhanced, and also double yellow lines along Romwell Road and possibly other smaller roads in the area. I believe, like many residents, this application should be refused on the same grounds as the last application. And then in terms of the final comments, these are from a Mr. Steve Nolder. He states, done as bullet points, this application is only in outline, so cannot be judged on any other specific redesign, layout, materials, etc., as they have not been disclosed. I'll probably just clarify on this point, and perhaps it's something I should have said at the beginning of my report. The application is outline, but there are different levels of outline development. In this case, the only matter that has been reserved for future consideration is landscaping. So the application in front of you does include the design, scale and design of the building, car parking and everything else. In states, second point, why are Explore Living running two simultaneous application? This one and a further application that is on appeal. Concerned that that they are trying to bamboozle the council and the general public with multiple applications. Also, why are Explore Living appealing against non-determination when the determination was delayed due to the COVID pandemic? The high-rise development is not wanted in Wickford, and council have rejected this so many times, and there are several hundred members of the public, potentially thousands, against this for numerous reasons. The proposed development is too large, overbearing for its location, which is a gateway in and out of Wickford towards Chelmsford. The residents don't want another high-rise building like Lower Southend Road. The building is too big and too ugly. Wickford has had a lack of investment regarding infrastructure over the years, and as such there are inadequate number of school places, doctor surgeries, and the roads and public transport are poor. There is also a mini city at Luke's Park just up the road. I think that's the Romwell site, I think that's a reference to, which is in Chelmsford, and they all use Wickford as their hub, and this is rarely factored into planning. We are aware of speed zones on the A127 and pollution measures around the Basildon area. Keen not to see this extended to Wickford due to too many cars and the pollution created. Location of the site is already prone to traffic issues in normal times. There was a child fatality a few years ago, and flooding is commonplace near the roundabout after heavy rainfall. I'm not sure how the town will cope with another 121 cars trying to come and go from this development during the morning and evening rush hours. Next point, is it really wise to be pushing ahead with all these high density developments where people are crammed in on top of each other and with little outside space? And I'm concerned for people's health and well-being in these COVID times. And I don't necessarily think we should take it for granted that once the vaccinations have been rolled out, this virus is necessarily going to go away. So people should have more outside space and not be crammed in like battery hens. Next point, will these flats really benefit the people of Wickford, or will it be a white elephant with developer stroke investors who make a return from a lot of rentals with people commuting to London? The next point, perhaps the only way forward is to have an open consultation with the council, developer, planning inspectorate and general public to come to a once and for all mutual agreement that everyone is happy with and can support. Please engage with the public properly with respect, not this 2 minutes to speak nonsense. I I'm assuming that's reference to the planning committee and the times that people are allowed to speak at the planning committee. I'm one of hundreds stroke thousands of local residents who is greatly concerned about the damage a development of the size on top of the other developments earmarked for the area will do. Thank you, Chairman. Apologies that took so long to go through.
No problem. Thank you very much. Right, next, I believe I have some speakers coming in. So first I have a Mr. McKay. Mr. McKay's in the waiting room. Ah, lovely. Just wait for sound. Mr. McKay, if we just unmute you. Hello there, Mr. McKay.
Good evening.
Good evening. Right, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak, and we'll let you know when you've got 30 seconds left. So if you'd like to begin.
Thank you. Good evening, members. Good evening, Chair. This is the 4th planning application that's come forward in recent years for the development of a landmark building on this site. A landmark building is what's required by your development plan to punctuate the Eastern Gateway to Wickford. One of those was approved at appeal. 3 previous applications came to your committee with strong recommendations to approve from officers, all of which were refused. There's a novelty here in that this one comes forward with an officer's recommendation to refuse this time on the basis of poor design. I come to you with a request, suspecting that this may very well be refused tonight, as previous applications have been, to take the guesswork out of what is required on this site as far as members are concerned. I greatly appreciate some dialogue with members and officers to try and nail a scheme that can be built here. I think everybody recognises this site needs to be developed. It's been empty since 2006. And the building before you tonight is an exact replica of the building the Planning Inspectorate considered suitable for construction here in 2007. Same height, same width, same depth, same length, same configuration of residential over commercial, although we'd happily do away with the commercial and put residential in there, but members have previously expressed a preference for commercial on the ground floor, but that's a matter that can be determined later. We've lowered the car parking, we've increased the car parking, and we've increased the units slightly by reorganising the internal space and removing car parking that was previously inserted within the first floor of the footprint of the building. If you read the officer's report, the only element that displeases them to cause the recommendation for refusal is poor design. Well, that's very subjective. We'd like to talk with them and with you about good design and what can go on here and can achieve your support and can allow the site to be developed. That's our ambition. We're local people. We've developed 3 schemes in Wickford already: the telephone exchange in Swan Lane, the old Jewson site, and Urban Pulse in Wickford High Street.
30 seconds.
We've done 2 schemes in Billericay. We live in Kelvedon. And we listen. We're local people. Tell us what you want. If it's viable, we'll produce it. We'll deliver it. And thank you for listening to me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKay. Okay, and up next, I believe I have a Mr. Harrison. Is Mr. Harrison, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Thank you.
Perfect. You'll be given 3 minutes to speak. When you've got 30 seconds left, we will let you know.
Thank you.
If you'd like to go. Thank you.
Right, firstly, I would like to thank the officer for a comprehensive report. One minor correction, on page 3 of the written report, the site is stated as 0.5 hectare. In actual fact, it is only 0.29 hectare. There is a long list of planning applications for this site going back to 2006, when an application refused by the planning committee was granted on appeal. It is questionable if that permission is exact. This current outline application more or less mirrors the 2006 building, with the addition of an extra floor and 12 additional units, an increase of nearly 15%. It would create an overpowering building of poor design. With regard to the commercial units, the application originally submitted included 14 two-bedroom maisonettes on the ground and mezzanine floors. Somewhere along the line, these have been changed to two-storey commercial. We have seen in the past that developers have built commercial units in secondary locations that have not let and have subsequently gained permission to convert into dwellings. Frazier's London Road and Lower Southend Road. The applicant has clearly stated that if there is no take-up of the commercial units, they would come back to revert to 100% residential on the ground floor. This would conveniently be 14 maisonettes, meaning 110 units, an overall increase above 2006 of 26 units or 31%, giving a density of 379 per hectare, the highest in Wickford. A backdoor method running rings round the council and without any increase in infrastructure. With regard to refuse and recycling, according to the officer's report, this will be taken from the application site. However, there is only a single from the refuse store to the car park area for transferring Euro bins to collection vehicles, but large double doors directly onto Romwell Road. The planning statement says vehicles will park in Romwell Road. Concerns were raised regarding collection vehicles parking in Romwell Road on previous applications. Councillor Buckley's submission encompasses the thoughts and mood of many Wickford residents. I hope that this committee concur with the officer's recommendation and refuse the application. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harrison. Right, next I have a Miss Kemp. Yes. Oh. Has she disappeared? Miss Kemp, right, let's ask you to unmute.
Hi there.
Hello there, Miss Kemp. You'll be given 3 minutes to speak. We will let you know when you've got 30 seconds left. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to start by noting that Mr. Mackay, who spoke previously, is the developer, and I find it somewhat surprising that it's only at this point, when the planning officer has refused the application, that there is active engagement from the developer, and also that the developer's own website states that...
Sorry, Miss Kemp, sorry to interrupt. We're having trouble hearing you. Is there any chance you could get a bit closer to the microphone?
Is that any better for you?
Is that better, everyone? Nod of head. Yep, perfect, thank you.
Apologies, shall I restart or shall I continue?
Oh, if you could restart, that'd be great, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Julie.
So I would start by noting that the developer, Mr. Mackay, who spoke before me, has only engaged, I believe, in this process now because the officer's recommendation is to refuse this application. And the developer's own website states that they will go ahead with the building on the basis of the extant planning permission, irrespective of the outcome of the existing applications that are currently going through the process. I don't need to speak about the height, the scale and the massing and the poor design of this building. I believe that the pictures speak for themselves. I'd like to focus as a local resident, my property, my house is shown on the final slide that we saw when the officer was giving the report. And I have concerns specifically on the car parking provision. The report refers to the council's own parking standards, and on the basis of my maths, that would require there to be 184 parking spaces. There are in fact 121, which means that there's a shortfall of 63, and that's not taking into account any parking for the commercial units. It's not at all clear how people who are visiting these commercial units are expected to park, and it would have a significant impact on the surrounding streets. It's also not clear what would happen if a further application was to be made to transform those commercial units into residential property. Presumably there would be no parking provision at all for those properties. And again, that would have a significant impact. I also think that the committee needs to be mindful of the affordable housing provision and the fact that there is none other than an offer of less than £400,000, which is significantly less than what was going to be offered up in 2007. To me, this just smells bad. £400,000 is significantly more than the price of a one-bedroom flat in Wickford. And the idea that there would be no provision at all on the site for affordable housing, when this is just the kind of development that should have affordable housing, raises serious questions around what kind of community we want to be and what kind of segregation the council would effectively be promoting. Finally, I think that we need to consider the impact of COVID, the demand for high-rise flats. If there's anything worse in this development, it would be this development being half empty, and the impact that that would have on the local community as a whole for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Kemp. Right, next I believe we have Councillor Brockman. Does Councillor Brockman get 5 minutes? Yeah. So Councillor Brockman, you will have 5 minutes to speak.
Hello, here I am again. Right. I think most of it's already been said anyway. What I would say is I can't believe that this company has actually started putting this building out on their website and saying, quote, this is unbelievable, you won't believe it. The main line railway station to London Liverpool Street is only 50 minutes and you can still get a seat in the morning rush. Well, I don't know what trains he's been on, but it's not been one of the ones I've been on, because you can't get a standing room, let alone a seat. So there's a lie straight away. So let's face false marketing. The other thing about 6 stories, look, I'm against high rises in total. Anything over 4 stories is wrong nowadays. And also we need to make sure that people have got outside spaces. So it needs to have proper balconies where you can sit outside, have a read, maybe eat or something. There's no provision for that. All these little Juliet balconies where people are going to be hanging out the window trying to have a quiet smoke or whatever. So you've got that problem. I just think that developers and people on planning as well, like your good selves, we should all think about, would we live in there ourselves? No, right. So therefore don't do it. I'm not going to go on too long because I'm going to bore you rigid. So that's me. Okay. Done.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brockman. Next, I believe I have Councillor Sargent. No, she's not joined us. Right. Okay then, so that is all of the speakers that I have. In which case, councillors who are on the committee, who would like to speak first? Councillor Turner.
Yeah, thank you. Can I ask the officers, we've had applications before that have been thinner grounds for refusal than this one. I just wonder, with the application that went to appeal, normally you would bring it back and say, you've got to approve this because this one's already been tested at appeal. And here we are approving basically that same development. Yet this time the opinion of officers is it's unworthy through the design. I can't reconcile that, because to me it just looks like we're giving this one a second bite at the cherry, but this time you don't like it, whereas before you did, and it was down to members to reject it, and the inspector upheld the appeal. So how do we go about that? I don't get the real sense in doing that. All I see is that we're heading off to the appeals case again, and all we're going to be landed with is the bill for being perverse. So perhaps the officers can tell us what chances we've got in defending it.
Thank you, Phil. If I can just bring Christine on that.
Councillor, that's a very good question. If we just go back to the last planning committee where this matter came forward, that was dealing with the non-determination matter. So we hadn't determined the application. So the applicants appealed for non-determination, and what we brought to committee was a reason for refusal, which we think could substantiate the council and protect the council on appeal. The reasons for refusal were the reasons that we'd used previously. Where we are now with this application, and I think Stuart did a very good explanation of where we are. It is based on the fact that Councillor Turner, sorry. I think Councillor Turner wants to say something, sorry.
Sorry, thank you. Sorry, it's like am I right in saying the previous application before the last one that looks like this, that was given approval on appeal as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's a 2000. So you've got the 2007 planning permission that was granted on appeal, which is one that looks very similar to this. So that was approved on appeal. But what Stuart said is the crux of this, is the fact that, and I think your position is right, is the fact that the application approved on appeal was of its time, and as Stuart pointed out and it's pointed out quite strongly in the report about the poor design of that building and how that building is of its time, and it's not something we'd want to see now. So the reasons for refusal are based around the fact that the massing of the building and its design and impact on the local area is not acceptable. So we were working with the applicant to deliver a far more effective building, which is what came to committee, and that was refused by planning committee, which is, as we said before, is completely acceptable. So this application that's come forward now, we've addressed that application based on the previous refusals that have come through the committee, and planning commission will be refused it's recommended for refusal on the fact that the impacts of that development we consider as officers, and that's put in front of members, to be unacceptable, and therefore we're recommending to members that we would support the refusal. Now, it already is appeal, and there is already an appeal pending anyway with the planning inspector relating to the application that's been appealed for non-determination, which we brought back to committee for reasons for refusal, which the planning committee agreed to. Those are recommendations for reason for refusal to put in front of the inspector, and we're now suggesting that this application, because it fails to meet the high levels of design quality we're looking for now in our developments, should also be refused. So that's where we've got to. So we don't think as officers that we are putting the council at any risk of being unreasonable.
Thank you. I would just say that, I mean, I'm happy to go along with the recommendation, I think this site, everybody agrees, everybody I speak to in Wickford agrees that this site is long overdue for development. And they want to see a good quality development put in that place. In fact, they're hungry for it. People up and down Wickford would tell me that that would be their #1 priority, to get that eyesore site developed in a sympathetic way and way that they can be proud of. And it just seems to me that we're doing the people of Wickford a bit of an injustice here, because if you believe, and I've got to believe that the developer that spoke earlier, they are quite happy to work with a council to get a decent quality site, whatever that may be, decent quality site developed. And I think we owe it to Wickford residents to give it our best shot and work with them so that we can bring a development on that perhaps not only the planning committee can approve on officers' recommendation, but the people of Wickford can get behind and agree that it needs to go through as well. And it's strange, isn't it, that when we've got developments that are of a good quality, a good disposition, we do get the residents behind us, and they do ask that we put it through. So I think we're missing an opportunity here. And as I say, I'm happy to put refusal through on this, but I would like to see us work closer with that developer. It sounds like Mrs. Lyons has already got that ongoing. Let's bring forward a development in the not too distant future that we can do Wickford residents and Wickford proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. I've got Councillor Rimmer and then Councillor Foster. Oh, the screen's moving around. There we go.
Thank you, Chair. I think the same. I mean, we've looked at this a number of times, and the issue is the bulk and mass of the building, and the bulk and mass of the building's got worse with this application. The planning inspectorate, I believe, agreed with us on the committee's reasons for refusal in terms of bulk and mass at one point. There's an issue with the extant planning permission in case it, and whether it is actually extant or not, and that is of concern. I find it hypocritical, though, of a council of the administration, however welcome they are to come and talk to planning committee, to be supporting high-rise developments in one part of the borough and flats that don't meet the national space standard in one part of the borough. But on the other side, this development has only got 4 apartments that don't meet the national space standards. So I'd be expecting them to be consistent and actually not support an administration that's actually doing that to other residents in other parts of the borough. But in terms of this particular development, yes, I think obviously it's a welcome offer of Mr. McKay and the developer to actually suggest that he should work with local councillors, local residents, the planning department to come up with a more sympathetic development. But this clearly isn't it. I can see quite clearly, I don't see it as a superficial reason why the officers have actually decided to refuse it in this particular case. When we were looking at the designs that they recommended for approval, there was a gap. There was 2 buildings and there was a gap. There was more openness for the development. This particular design, we are left with a huge, the mass is even worse because there is absolutely no gap between those 2 buildings and that sort of outline, and the street view is going to be massively affected by what they are actually proposing today. So on that basis, and I'm going along with the recommendation to refuse. I thought the residents came up with some great points on the whole. As I say, perhaps Councillor Brockman can actually put some more leverage, and Councillor Harrison and other administration people that she's in coalition with, to stop similar developments and worse developments in other parts of the borough.
Councillor Rimmer, that's nothing to do with this application. Thank you. Right, next I have Councillor Foster.
Thank you. Yeah. Obviously, for me, I haven't got any history with this particular application. They're all pretty new to me.
Councillor Foster, sorry, can I just stop you? I've got a point of order from Councillor Rimmer.
Okay.
Councillor Rimmer, please raise your point of order.
I believe the point of us being muted was to be able to speak uninterrupted when it was our turn, not to have interjections and then to be muted partway through without us even finishing. That was the sort of protocol that you put in place. So it would be good if you respected that. Just because you don't like what I'm saying is not a matter to do. You're not allowed to do that. This is a democracy still, as you'll find on the 6th of May, when you will find some of your colleagues are not returned.
And yet again, Councillor Rimmer, you're going off point, so I'm going to put you back on
Can
mute.
I carry on with my points before that I was making when you interjected and muted me?
As long as you're on point.
So getting back to the planning committee meeting and the actual recommendation, I would say that I would support refusing it. The residents did raise some very important points in respect of it. I also have concerns about the sports facility and the overshadowing, and that actually there is more bulk and mass with this proposal as well on the overshadowing. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. You're all finished now.
Yes, thank
you. Right. Apologies, Councillor Foster. Please continue.
No problem. Yeah, so obviously, as I say, most of these developments are new to me. So I've obviously looked at it with fresh eyes. And I must admit that my initial reaction was to be quite startled. The impression was almost draconian to me. I haven't seen anything look quite that severe in a long time. And I noticed there's been many references to the 2006-2007 application, which reputedly covered not a dissimilar area, but it looked a lot less draconian. And obviously, when you look at it, had considerably less flats, between 10 and 20%, depending on exactly how many they managed to convert back. I thought Councillor Brockman's interjection was quite interesting, because it was very short, but basically stated exactly what summed up exactly really what a lot of the other people were saying. It just doesn't fit within the bounds of what it's asking to. Although the person from the developers was there asking to be able to communicate better, I'm not really quite sure where that stands, because really he must have picked up, I would have thought, certainly from this exercise and probably from the previous ones, that most people want a building which is not that high in that area. Now, obviously, the lower the building, the less the profit. The difference between the cost is probably doesn't represent the difference. But unfortunately, ideally, to put, if he wants people to agree and to join him in welcoming a building in that area, I think he's got to think more of four levels than 6, quite honestly. And that's really it. I totally support what's been said. And I'm pleased the planners have actually decided to look at this and decide that there is a limit to what they can push designs, and that the consensus of bad design has actually come through, and they're willing to stand by that theory. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Right, next I have Councillor McGovern and then Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. Thanks, Melissa. As so often, it's a member of the public that probably makes the most pertinent point. I think it was Miss Kemp, I do apologise if I got your name wrong, who made the point that the developer, despite having ample opportunity to reframe their plans, talk to residents, talk to the council, etc. Hadn't done that until tonight, when the recommendation from the officers was refusal. And she made the point that that's probably why all of a sudden they were so keen to have a new spirit of communication with both residents and the council. Councillor Turner, as so often, tried to make a cheap political point. As so often, he was wrong. This council, this administration, has made a point of working with developers. When we work with developers, we are criticised for working with developers, and then we are criticised for not working with developers. So which way round is it? The truth of the matter is, we will talk to developers, to anyone with valid plans for this town, for this borough. And that is the case of the matter. And in terms of Councillor Rimmer's cheap political points, we are here as a planning committee, and I'm an occasional guest, to consider each application on its individual merits. That is what we are attempting to do tonight. So if Councillor Rimmer could stick to the point and not wander off and predetermine applications that have not yet come to the committee, I think we'd all be grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McGurran. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. I haven't got a vote tonight, but if I did have, I would be supporting the officer's recommendation. I've opposed this type of development on here since the original one in 2006. It is a constrained site. It doesn't deserve this type of development. And some of the points Councillor Turner made, I thought were very relevant. It's the part of the problem is probably the price paid for this land originally in 2006 when land prices were high. And since then, I think developers, I think it's changed hands a couple of times, a difficulty in making it viable for what they've paid for the land. But the problem is, because of the appeal decision, 6 stories has become acceptable in terms of what the developers want to put on the site. But to put a 6-story one that costs the whole length, the appearance is utterly ridiculous for that part of Whitford. I urge all members on this committee to support the officer's recommendation, because this would be a very bad decision if this was allowed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Rimmer, did you want to come back, or is your hand still up from earlier?
Yeah, I was just wanted to address the accusation of predetermination on future planning applications very quickly because it was made. I was commenting on Councillor Brockman. I wasn't commenting on future planning applications.
Can I just put a stop to going backwards and forwards on this one now? As a planning committee, we are not predetermined. That's not why we're here. That's against all of the rules. So I'm just going to put a stop before any accusations, any name calling. Let's just call it a day on that one, please. Thank you very much. Councillor Morris.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Just a few brief points. I agree with what everyone else has said about this application, having been involved with it, like many people over the years. I will certainly be agreeing with the planning officer's recommendation. What I would like to do, though, is just ask a question of Ms. Lyons. We were told last week that the County Council Planning and Development can't give a recommendation. They can't say that they disagree with an application or they object to an application. That being the case, if they're not allowed to do that, why is it necessary to write in the report that they don't have objections? If they can't have an objection, then whether they've had one or not, why is it written in the report? It seems a bit either they can or they can't have an objection. So perhaps I could just ask her to comment on that.
Councillor Morris, you're quite right. That's an error, and I'll make sure that doesn't happen again, because it shouldn't. They've got. I think it should be no comment rather than no objection. So you're quite right. That is an error in the report.
Lovely. Do I have any further speakers on this? Oh, Councillor Turner wants to come back in. Yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to be either thick or stupid to believe that my points were political. They weren't. And in fact, I'd rather the administration stayed away from developers after. The point is, we've got opportunity there to do what's right for Wickford residents. That's the issue. And it failed to make an impact on Councillor McGarren because he just doesn't understand it. I'm not in the business of playing politics with people's lives. And here we have an opportunity. Yes, Councillor McGarren, you can shake your head. We've seen what you do to people's lives. But in actual fact, we need to get the two halves together. I'm not asking for the administration to talk to the developer, but if we got the planners together with the developer, we could come up with a scheme that would suit everybody's needs. And that's the issue here, getting something right for Wickford and its residents, full stop. Not political, just practical. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Right, if I've got no other speakers, I'm going to just have my quick view on this one. I haven't been involved in any of the other planning applications that have come through. This one is completely fresh. It's my new time on the planning committee. It's too big a development on too small a space. It literally looks like someone is just aiming the biggest block they could fit onto there to see what they could do. And with residents' views, councillors' views, I don't think that this is something that should be going ahead as is put down at the moment. So I'll be going with the officer's recommendations as well. So with that in mind, if I can go to the vote. So the recommendation is that planning application number 20/00549/OUT be refused planning permission for the reasons set out at the end of the report. I'll come to each councillor in turn. If you could please all turn your cameras on and I'll take your vote. Councillor Turner.
I'm for the recommendation.
Oh, now my Zoom. There we go. Councillor Morris.
Yeah, I'm in favour of the recommendation.
Councillor Kettle. You can unmute Councillor Kettle.
Can you hear me?
Yep, can now.
Okay, in favour.
In favour of the recommendation, lovely. Councillor Rimmer.
I'm in favour of refusal.
Councillor McGarren.
Yeah, in favour of the recommendation, which is refusal.
Yep.
To clarify Councillor Rimmer's response there.
Councillor Adnerin.
Yes, in favour of the recommendation.
I forgot about myself there. I'm in favour of the recommendation for refusal. So we will just count that up better with us. Lovely. So that is everyone in favour, 7 recommendations, in recommendation of refusal of planning. So that recommendation is carried forward. Right. If I can now move on to agenda item number 4, which is planning application 20/01591/4, which is proposed change of use from a community centre into 3 two-bed flats at Kingswood Community Centre, Clay Hill Road. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, relates to the Kingswood Community Centre and the proposal for a conversion or change of use of the existing community centre into 3 flats. It's brought before the committee as the application has been submitted by the Council's Housing Service, and under the Council's constitution has to be determined at committee level. So the slide here shows the locations of the site. It's sited on the south side of Clay Hill Road, immediately to the southeast of its junction with Coddenham Strait, within the Kingswood area, a short distance from the Basildon Town Centre itself. The site forms part of the neighbourhood parade, erected in the 1960s, contains shop units and commercial units on the ground floor, with first floor level the community centre itself and 3 residential flats. The surrounding area is predominantly residential in character, although you have the Kingswood Baptist Church to the immediate north west of the site, the Kingswood School playing fields to north of Clay Hill Road, and further to the east you've got the Allen Pussycat Public House and the local doctor's surgery to the north east as well. So next slide, Ellie. This shows the existing building itself. You can see it's this brown clad structure on the western end of the parade. The main access is by way of the stairs on the centre of that top left-hand picture. The bottom right-hand picture just shows the western elevation. There are a number of windows in that elevation itself. You can just see that the building itself overhangs the footpath below. Go to the next slide. So the application is proposal for a change of use of the existing or vacant community centre into 3 two-bed social rented flats. The units on the flats, 1 and 2, which are basically the left-hand side of the slide there, will be accessed from the existing stairwell onto the front of the building, with the 3rd flat that's in the southeast corner of the plan there, accessed by way of the existing stairwell at the rear of the building. The units themselves will, as I mentioned, have two bedrooms, a living stroke kitchen dining area, a bathroom, and hall and storage cupboard. To go to the next slide. It just shows the proposed external changes. So the cladding would be removed, and a new insulation kind of brick cladding would be proposed around the elevations of the building. As you can see from the slides, it'll be a mix of red and buff coloured bricks. Also be new windows plus new window openings to provide light to the new flats, as well as new roof felts to improve the insulation of the whole building itself. So next slide, please. That just shows the remaining elevations, just to say predominantly red brick, but with these buff coloured areas. Let's go to the next slide. So, is that right? Yeah. So if we go to the general principle and any objections received, say the site itself, say is in an urban area, the MPPF makes it clear there's presumption for sustainable development in such areas, and the tilted balance that I think was previously mentioned is engaged in respect of housing applications where there is a 5-year, where the 5-year land supply cannot be demonstrated, as is currently the case in this council. Excuse me. The main issue in this case is the loss of the community facility. Emerging policy HC11 includes a number of criteria that have to be met that have been met in such cases. The first one being, whether the existing building is in current use. So the existing site has been vacant for a number of years, I believe since 2017. The community association moved out, and it's been vacant since that time. The main reason for that has been that the first floor location of the building provides poor accessibility for persons with mobility issues, and there's also it was like, because you have to access the existing flights of steps, and also some issues with safety and evacuation matters using these narrow stairways. The council had considered installation of a lift. However, that would impact on the commercial units on the ground floor, and it's felt that's not a reasonable solution in this case. It's therefore felt the existing centre is unfit for its purpose as a community centre, and another use was sought. It's also been put forward that there are a number of other community uses or facilities in the area, such as the Kingswood Open Space Building Centre, on the Kingswood Open Space. There's also a number of function rooms at Kingswood, Club Kingswood, and at the golf course itself, as well as there being a local community centre in Great Mistley, a short distance from the site itself. So if we consider the loss of the community centre is acceptable, the use of the first floor for residential accommodation is felt to be acceptable in principle, given there are residential flats adjoining the site. We go to the issues of design, as shown on the earlier photographs. The building would be reclad in a brickwork. It's felt that this would be an improvement on the current visual appearance of the building. The additional windows wouldn't create any major overlooking issues of neighbouring properties, and the improvements to the installation, the sustainable issues of the building would be improved as a result of the proposed works themselves. I think I forgot to mention, there's also additional refuse stores and a cycle store proposed as part of the building. These would be on the ground floor, with the refuse bins set to the rear of the building, access from the service road to the south. In terms of amenity space, due to the building being on the first floor, there would be no on-site provision. However, it should be noted that the site is only a short walk from the Kingswood Open Space mentioned earlier, which would offer suitable areas for recreational purposes should residents wish to use it. The units themselves would meet or exceed, the minimum space standards set out in the government guidance. In terms of density, the building is felt to be, or the level of development is felt to be acceptable and won't appear cramped in this particular location. With regards to impact from noise from the adjoining units, the applicants have put in a noise impact assessment, and they've put forward some mitigation measures to minimise any outside noise intrusions into the building itself. The environmental health officers have considered those aspects, and whilst they have raised some issues, they have noted that the adjoining units are already in residential use, and they've not received any objections in the past to any noise that may be emanating from either the road adjoining or the adjoining commercial units, and they have raised no objections to the proposed change of use of this building, subject to the provision of those mitigation measures. In terms of impact on neighbouring occupiers, we had received one objection since I completed my report, this being from the unit directly below the proposed works themselves. They are a councilling agency, and they seem to be concerned about noise and disruption, particularly during the building works themselves, and they feel that may have a great impact on their property. However, any development of this site will cause some temporary disturbance, and the applicants are to approach the occupiers to try and minimise any potential disturbance should permission be granted. In terms of other neighbouring occupiers, so there's no extension to the building. The current window openings are to be retained. They won't be no closer to the adjoining residences, and it's not felt there'll be any significant increase in overlooking or overshadowing from the proposed buildings, proposed works itself. Next issue is to do with parking and potential highway issues. The parking standards for a scheme of this scale would require 7 spaces. However, the parking standards do make exceptions for sites that are close to or frequent or expensive public transport. In this case, it's felt the site is a very sustainable location. It's close to the town centre itself, the railway stations, and also the adjoining road has a good bus service should residents wish to get to other parts of the area itself. In terms of actual parking on the surrounding area, the applicants have submitted a parking survey which has shown that there isn't a high level of parking stress in the area, and should any residents have parking cars, they would be able to park in the adjoining streets without too much issue and not lead to any significant additional parking issues within that locality. The highway authority have not raised any objections to the level of or potential highway issues that the proposal may generate, and therefore has not felt that there is any justification for refusal of this scheme on highway or parking grounds. The applicant has agreed to provide a contribution to the recreational management strategy as set out in the report, and in conclusion, it is considered that the proposed development in the form of 3 self-contained flats will provide much needed social-oriented housing, making efficient use of this currently underused community facility situated within an urban area. It's been designed to ensure it doesn't impact on neighbouring properties, and whilst it would lack any dedicated parking, it is a very sustainable location, and as a result, it's considered that the scheme would accord with the development plan and the general objectives of the NPPF, and is therefore recommended for approval, subject to conditions on pages 43 and 44. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now, I believe I have Councillor Smith wishing to speak on this item. Is he?
No, he's not here.
No,
He's got another meeting, so he must still.
He's held up. Okay, no problem. In that case, I've got some councillors with their hands up, so I will take Councillor Turner first.
Yeah, just one point of clarification, and that is on the excuse me, on the parking. Are we just assuming that people will park where they can find a space?
Hello. Oh, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if someone does have a car, they would either park behind the shopping parade where there are spaces for either residents or shoppers, or within the adjoining streets. And so the parking survey has shown that there are quite a reasonable number available.
Have you been down Coddenham Street?
Yeah, many times. Yeah.
And you think there's enough parking there?
Overall, you can't say they make certain days. I've been, because we had the application for the Baptist church a few years back, and I've been down on a Sunday as part of that application, and could easily park within that locality even when the church was on.
Okay, thank you.
Next, I have Councillor Rimmer.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, my concern is actually, I mean, I don't think the loss of community centre or community facility is acceptable. I'm hearing from residents that actually they're going to feel that loss considerably. I take the officers' advice on this, that actually it was no longer a suitable location for a community facility in terms of lack of access, but I would have expected to have heard some notes about where we were reprovisioning that community facility, where we were going to create a new one, because effectively we have just taken one away and we're not really replacing it. On to the matter of the design, I do have some, I am concerned now, I'm looking at this, about the energy efficiency of the properties, because they look like quite exposed in terms of the actual surface area of the properties themselves. Unless I'm looking at this idea of them being on legs and not having much underneath them, does concern me. I'm wondering if there's actually extra insulation needed to actually get them up to standard on that, and just concerns about that. And so, I mean, if that could be addressed by one of the officers, that would be quite helpful.
Councillor Rimmer, the matter relating to the an echo here. The community previous use is actually set out in the report. It was last used in 2017. That is clearly in the report on page 37, and it goes on to show you where there are existing.
Apologies, that wasn't my point. I was just saying, and I know it's been lost in 2017. I'm just saying I find the loss of it and no plan to replace it as unacceptable.
I think the issue is the fact that there is other suitable facilities in that location, and I think what the policy is about actually making sure that we make the best use of those community facilities. So I think what the report says is that it was last used in 2017, so therefore its loss has already been accepted for the past 3 to 4 years, and therefore those uses that were previously in there have been replaced or put in those other community facilities. And in terms of your very good point, Councillor Rimmer, which obviously is nice to see, the energy side of things, that is picked up in condition 9, and that basically, so no development shall commence until the energy strategy demonstrating a reduction in carbon dioxide emissions over the Part L is put in place. That will make sure that we've got a fully compliant building that obviously hopefully restricts the amount of energy required to make it warm. Or make it cool as well, both ways. So that is picked up in the as a condition of the planning the recommendation within the report.
Sorry, yeah, it's just to come back on that. That satisfies me on that in terms of the energy efficiency in that condition. Thank you, the heads of planning on that. In respect to the loss of community facility, I am minded obviously to accept this because obviously the development itself is generally okay. I'm not too convinced by the aesthetic of the outside. I'm sorry, David. It's not my taste. But the condition on the energy efficiency is fine. I just want it to be noted that although I will be agreeing with the recommendation, I do not accept that the loss of community facility is acceptable. And I think there should be some reprovision of community facility in that area.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. I've got a few hands, just to let you know the order. I've got Councillor Morris, Councillor Foster, Councillor Kettle, and then Councillor McGovern. So, Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chairman. Yep, it obviously is a shame to lose a community asset like this. However, I think it is only right, as is said in the report, that if there are accessibility issues, which is a health and safety issue, then then the council should step in and make sure that it's not being used when it's unsafe to do so. But I mean, this was back in 2007, as Councillor Rim has just said. Why has it taken 4 years before of an empty building before we've got this application come before us? I mean, it's a reasonable use of the area, but you know, why? Anyway, as has been mentioned before, there are obviously issues with regards to parking. There always are, and the fact that there's no outdoor space. Okay, so there is a park across the way, and this is only a second story. It's not as if it's a great tall block which people have struggled to find anywhere to go outside and have outdoor activities. But it would be nice if there were there's some parking spaces. I wonder if it's possible whether some of the spaces that can be I think it says somewhere in the report that there's spaces that can be allocated, whether we can allocate at least some 3 spaces to these flats. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Does anyone want to come back in response to that point? David.
David, sorry.
Hello. Yeah, right. No, I think the in an ideal world they can look at the allocating them, but it's that would be a different service that deals with the parking to the rear of the site. I think that's our corporate property rather than the housing service. So there's potentially they could look at that, but that wouldn't be something we could insist on in this particular application.
Councillor Morris, I think from our perspective, it would fall outside the planning application red line, and therefore we couldn't ask for that to be as part of this application. There would have to be a formal agreement to allow that to happen. Obviously, the red line is around the building where the change of use has occurred and doesn't include the land to the rear where the car parking is. So this building has come forward, I presume, as part of the community building asset review. They've been looking at some of the assets we've got across, well, not community, the building assets we've got across the borough, and this is one of those that are shown up as a building that can come forward. But again, it's only the building itself, and it's not any of the land that sits around it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Foster.
Thank you. These are probably things that I should probably learn as we move along and I get more experience. But the first one is really that they all relate to the previous use in a way. For instance, the access and egress of the actual premises. Everyone's agreed that it's not suitable for a sort of a commercial public building, recreation building. But like where you've got, say, the dual access into the 2 flats, are we actually really happy that in the case of an emergency, that does give people a good exit from a building, say, were there to be a fire or something like that? So because obviously people leaving in an emergency is completely different to normal people's normal reaction. The second point I would like to ask is these brick insulation things have been around in various forms for lots of years, and Miss Lyons answered adequately about the fact that they have to show that it works. I just wondered, is that against like the current level of insulation or the level of insulation we hope to move up to, say, in the local plan? Which hopefully is going to be progressively higher. I wonder what level we were actually aiming at. I suppose probably we're not allowed to aim too high. And there was the third one, which has completely gone. Yeah, well, I'm sorry. The third, I've had a bit of a brain death moment. I'll put that down to age, if you don't mind.
So, Councillor Foster, we can only ask currently for the requirements at Part L, and that's set out in the condition. So that's the maximum we can ask for, and I'm quite sad about that. We should be asking for more. In terms of the fire comment you made, just ask the development manager, but he hasn't responded to me yet. We could deal with that through looking at a condition requiring them to submit a fire strategy. So that would probably be a way that we could deal with that formally for you, is that we just put a condition requiring a fire strategy state. And that obviously we're not the, you've got to be careful here, because and we got I've got recently ticked off by council on this point. We're not building control services, so we can't look at fire like the building control services can. So we can ask for a strategy that sets out what I can deal with under the planning legislation and not go into the remit of the of building regulations. But we can ask for a condition relating to the implementation of a fire strategy and submission of those details. So I'm happy and content to put that additional condition on that will then deal with that the egress and access point you've made, and also ensure that if there is any other requirements, they are met at that stage, but not going into the fire regulations set out in the building regs, because I will get ticked off again by council on that point. Okay.
I don't want to get you in hot water, but thank you very much.
Yeah, that's all I've been experienced. So we'll add it. We'll if the planning permission is granted, we'll ask for additional condition related to fire strategies.
Thank you.
We'll agree that wording with the chair or the vice chair after committee.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I can hear from Councillor Kettle.
Can you hear me? Yeah, good. Right. Yeah. As the community centre, I live in the Kingswood area and I've been here for 49 years, and I know the area because I use the shops. Now, yes, I'm going to vote for the 3 flats that are going to be on, because it's not going to be sky-rise. There is another community centre for which because the one above Kingswood, straight, the one above Kingswood shops is not disabled friendly because it's all stairs. And I'm disabled and I can't climb up and down stairs, but there's a lot of people out there that live in the Kingswood area that are worse off than me. So what we did, we've got a community centre across the road near the doctor's surgery in the open space, which we had repaired, refurbished. We had new floors put into the Kingswood Community Centre, new windows. We've had a disabled friendly toilet. You've got open space where amusements that the kids can play, the parents can go and sit down. It's right next to Kingswood School. And so we've got other communities in the area that are quite adequate to take up. So I just want to point out, and there is stairways because there is flats up there already. And I know some of the residents that live in them flats. And so it's going to be the same level. So it's not going to affect anything at all. But that community centre, and it was handed back, the keys were handed back in 2017 because it was never used. So hang on, let's get my brain in gear. That's all I've got to say at the moment. But the Kingswood Community Centre across the road is adequate for disabled people, children, young mums, preschool and everything. So, yeah, I think, because I'm getting out of breath now, so I think I'll leave it at that at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kettle. Right, thank you for being patient, Councillor McGovern. There we go.
I'm noted, Chair, for being patient. I think we'll all agree on that. And I'd like to thank Councillor Kettle and the Head of Planning, because they've made most of the points I was about to make. So thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, in terms of Councillor Rimmer's point about the the community facility, I think it's been well dealt with, particularly by Councillor Kettle just there, that there are alternatives. I mean, we're fortunate, Kingswood's fortunate in that respect. It's unusual in that there are other facilities that are available that are more suitable and are well used. So that's good news. I was just curious with Councillor Rimmer, who these residents are he talks to. It's fascinating that the local councillors are not encountering this strength of feeling about the local centre that's been empty for 4 years. And you know, it's also interesting that Councillor Rimmer doesn't advise them, if they feel so strongly, to contact this committee to register their opinions, which no local resident did, for the reasons that have just been outlined by Councillor Kettle. So thank you very much for that. And I would just like to make one very obvious point. I'm wholeheartedly in favour of 3 flats being provided for social rental. I'm a great believer in social rental, in stark contrast to some of our Conservative colleagues who seem to only like social housing when they're buying it.
Thank you, Councillor McGovern. Councillor Rimmer.
We get on so well on planning until you get Councillor McGovern coming on with his partisan points, but there we go. I mean, I'll try and stick just to planning matters, unlike Councillor McGovern, who's a political broadcast for the Labour Party half the time. But here we go. On the community facility point, I do take on board what Councillor Kettle is saying on that. I also noted with interest that she's against Skyride. In terms of, and Councillor McGovern said he agreed with all of her points, so that's interesting too, isn't it? But going on to the planning aspect itself, there's enough concerns for me on this, actually thinking about it, with the aesthetic, with the actual situation, the loss of community provision, and the lack of parking that have been raised by councillors tonight, that I'm going to abstain. I think the final points by Councillor McGovern convinced me to abstain.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, this was actually the other point that I was going to raise. I finally got there. When we were having the technical meeting, I asked Charles about the effects of what's been happening over the last 3 months with the tilt, and he was going to try and find out. I appreciate that's possibly might take a bit of time because there may be some calculations involved, but because as with many other things, the tilt thing has sort of raised its head again. I wondered if Charles could say if there's any headway been made with that at all, or whether it's obviously going to take a little bit of time.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, so I'm just talking with our policy colleagues on that, so that they need to calculate sort of the 5-year housing land supply. I think that's probably around March, April time. So around about now, really. So when that's available, I'll let all planning committee members know.
Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Now I can't see any more raised hands from any of our members. So with that, we will take this to the vote. So the recommendation is that planning application 20/01591/4 be granted conditional planning permission. Now that is with the extra condition in regards to the implementation of the fire strategy. So I will come to you all, Jim. I'm going to unmute you all first. So please play nicely. And then I will come to you all in turn. If all councillors can just turn their camera on while they're voting, please. Right, Councillor Morris.
In favour.
Councillor Kettle.
Favour.
Councillor Rimmer.
Abstain.
Councillor Turner.
Purely on the parking provision, Chairman, I'm voting against.
Councillor McGovern.
absolutely in favour. Social housing, albeit only a small bit, much needed. Well done, everyone involved.
Thank you. Councillor Adden-Aaron.
Yes, in favour.
In favour. And I vote in favour. So that's that's 5 votes in favour, 1 against and 1 abstention. So with that, Planning Commission is granted. Right, now I'm just going to mute you all again. So can I just take a minute, now the business is finished. If we can thank Stuart. I don't know where Stuart's gone. He is there. Hello, Stuart. You're back. It's just to say thank you very much for your service to the Planning Committee, as tonight is your last meeting because you're retiring on the 11th of March. So thank you very much for over 30 years of service to the council. It's been appreciated and you will be missed. And I'm sure everyone will miss you greatly. So thank you very much. Lovely. So thank you very much, everyone. With that, I will conclude the meeting and I will see you in 2 weeks.